What's up, everyone? We are live right now on Cannabis, and if you're joining us on YouTube or Spotify, thank you so much for tuning in today. We have a great show for you. We're going to be talking about a very cool new technology. We're talking to Tim from Sambo Creek Filtration. So we're going to be nerding out about like dry sieving, hash, and all sorts of things. So JR has a really great show for you today. But before we get too far into it, first off, I need to shout out our Cannabis community, everyone that supports us, supports the show. They enjoy our podcast. You can do that. You can support us by joining the Cannabis community. So search Cannabis in the App Store or go to cannabis.app in your browser. Sign up and use the code BUZZ for a free month. And then after that, you can pay as little as $4.20 a month. And your support helps us go to events. It helps JR go to farms and do cool videos on our YouTube channel. And we appreciate your support. Also going to shout out lostcoastplanttherapy.com. If you need a knockdown spray to help knock down some bugs or help you take care of some other things that are trying to take down your plants, check out lostcoastplanttherapy.com. Grab some of their really great IPM spray and give some love to Dirk over there. And we thank them for their support. And then last shout outs from me goes to SacredThreeMushrooms.com or TanaziGardens.com, right? Is that JR?
Yeah. TanaziGardens.com is where you'll get all your genetics.
Okay, cool. And then SacredThreeMushrooms.com is where you can get your grow kits. So for as little as I think like $80, you can get a kit where you can grow your own edible mushrooms or other kinds of mushrooms if you're into that sort of thing. So check out their grow kits and videos and use the code Cannabis for a discount. And then JR, take it away.
Okay, so we got some Tiki announcements. He's doing some of his classic crossings. He's got the Headhunter by Winter Storm out right now, and that's at NeptuneSeedbank.com. And the other thing I wanted to shout out was the Helio Supply. They sent me their new Smart Bar, which I got to say, this thing is pretty sweet. It's discreet in the way that you put your card in, and you just kind of hit it and go. It's got adjustable voltage, which is cool. So you can dial it into how much your lungs can take. Because mine over the years I'm at about a 2.4. That's the number I like. So check out Helio Supply. They have that Smart Bar 510 battery. It's pretty slick. I like it. For traveling, clutch. For just kind of stealthiness and being the ninja, it's clutch. So hit them up. But today, I'm really excited about our guest today. Tim has been in the industry and been a part of this community for over half a century. And so there's a lot to talk about there. And he's come up with something that I think is really going to change and revolutionize the way we process hash in the dry sieving or dry sifting category. That said, with this introduction, I'd really, if you don't mind, we always ask our guests how they fell in love with the plant. But for you, Tim, I would like for you to just kind of take us from the teen years to through the 20s, because I really want to have you as a guest, as a recurring guest, so we could kind of talk about some of this journey along the way, because to me, it's very important to what we stand on today. So welcome to the show, Tim, and kind of give us how you fell in love with the plant and kind of up through the 20s.
I don't know. It's a hard thing to actually pinpoint when the time was, you know what I mean? But it was more of I was 14 years old and we were surfers and, doing the beach thing and, how that goes. Then sure enough, there's the brickweed. And next thing you know, it's like, well, hey, how can we keep surfing, right? How can we make money to keep surfing but not have a job? Of course, being a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. So it just one thing led to another. Part of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. I don't know if many people have heard of that. It's very old, but it was basically the Silk Road for hash, getting into Europe and then coming through New York and into the United States for a long time. That was kind of the original group that really started moving Afghani hash and Lebanese and everything else, anything to kind of get your hands on. So yeah, it was a strange period of time there. Definitely did a lot of different things, back and forth to Pakistan and Nepal and Afghanistan and different things like that. Moving things like they had vinyl belts so we'd fill with hash oil, right? So you'd bring back a box of 200 vinyl belts, and then you'd squeeze them out, put them in a centrifuge, make honey oil, and sell it. It was just kind of a long cycle. But yeah, after the 70s, things got pretty radical with Nixon and that's when things changed a lot for everybody.
Yeah, so there was a certain level of danger whenever you were in these foreign countries. But at that time, you started facing a war and danger from your own government.
Oh, yeah. That's when actually, like the government of Nepal, which is a long story, but I can get with that. And I sent you those books, Joe. And basically, Nixon went into Nepal and said to the king at the time, because it was a kingdom, he said to the king, I'll give you $50 million if you make that stuff illegal. So he did. $50 million in the 70s is what, $1 billion now? I have no idea. But my point being, it was an exorbitant amount of money for him. So and that's what a lot of the things that were going on back then with the DA and so forth, and the wanting to patent pot. I mean, it's a whole series of years of things that people I don't think understand now what went on.
Well, I'll go ahead and shout out the book you were referencing to, and it's The King of Nepal, Life Before the Drug War, by Joseph R. Petrie is what it looks like. Petrie. So if you want to kind of get into that rabbit hole and kind of learn a lot about what the drug war was and all that whole process of losing governments, it's literally CIA and our government will move into a country and they'll flip that country, and then it's kind of game over and you got to move on to the next.
The drug wars were bad. Reagan was bad, but Nixon really kind of sealed the deal. He was the capper, because they went around the world, and basically what they wanted to do, everybody sort of skunk one. I don't want to get too much into all this, but basically they'd go into a country like that and they'd chop down a crop, but then they'd leave seeds for other things to taint them. So when it becomes a patenting pot, which is what people are doing now, they will have that piece of their DNA in everything in that country. That means when it comes down to patenting something for whatever illness people may have, they will say, oh, see that little link there? That means it's ours.
Yeah, I had a buddy who he went to Peru to get genetics, and he thought, how great it was that he had these genetics from Peru, but I just reminded him that greenhouse seeds had probably already been there.
Yeah, it's like Morocco right now. I'm working on a big project there because basically their land races have been wiped out because of all the people from Europe coming down with, oh, try this, and California, everywhere in the world came there and threw shit at them. And of course they went for it. And now they're in a quandary, and we're working a lot of projects. The guys there in Washington, I'm working with them a lot on trying to get back what they need there.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, I kind of want to move forward because we have a lot to cover here. There's so much information for you to share with us. So first, tell us about Sambo Creek Filtration and some of the equipment besides the separator plasmatic that we'll be talking about later in the show.
Charles is the owner of Sambo Creek and his beautiful wife, a smart engineer. It's named Sambo Creek because that's a creek that he grew up near in South America. So it's something for his memory. And basically cover all kinds of filtration equipment, from alcohol, some BHO stuff. We do wet processing of trichomes. So we've got a complete bubble hash operation systems. We have filters for the people doing alcohol. We've got centrifuges, cold centrifuges, so we can run a cold step process with no heat to a solventless product, and many different things. We've got screens if you want to try hand sieving. We've pretty much cover all the pieces to try and make somebody operational.
Excellent. So go ahead, Q.
So I was gonna we're gonna kind of kick off this next section. We're gonna be talking about dry sieving, but before we get too far into the details, could you kind of introduce to folks that are, you know, maybe new to the subject or might not know what it is? What is dry sieving?
Yeah, dry sieving was one of the first original ways of extracting trichomes from a plant. Basically, I think everybody's in the thought, the process that hand hash, quote unquote, hand rubbed hash was probably the first. There's people touching it and it's on your hands, and sure enough. Now, dry sieving is a matter of letting the plant dry out and then retrieving the trichomes themselves. We use different methods. Most of the things you'll see, and you can go to the Sambo Creek YouTube site, and we have some shots there from Morocco and Pakistan where we've been and presented our equipment and done different things with those people. So you can see the traditional ways, where originally it was silk screens back in the day before there was a lot of the materials we have now. So it was finely woven silk to use as a filter. Of course, now we're into nylon screens and metal screens, like some of these here, like this small screen here. You know, this is 75 micron. I got 45 and 25 also. And this is more for the home guy. You know, this is somebody who's got a small amount. They only want to sieve or separate. Now, key with dry sieving is, as it states, dry. The key word, you must have a dry environment. The material itself, you know, is growing at 70, 80, 90 degrees, no problem. So it'll hold there, but the material tends to get a little sticky at those temperatures. So what you want is something around 50, 60 degrees, you know, nothing crazy. You don't need frozen, but in the 50s to 60s to keep the terpenes from expelling and then keep the material from being sticky. I've actually run the static equipment at 68 degrees Fahrenheit and 23% humidity, no problem, right? The temperature wasn't relative because the humidity was low. The material was still working like sand. And that's the key. You want the material to be like sand on the beach. We sell big screens also, the big ones, so you can work your material, but basically you would take your material and let it dry out completely and then shake off the old way. I mean, this is way back. We would hang a plant for 3 months in a dark room before we would shake it to get the trichomes off. That was the old school method, quote unquote. Nowadays, people tend to wait a little less time and use mechanical processes, mechanical vibrators and so forth. But basically, you want to take as much of the trichomes off with as little biomass as possible. But there's going to be some, for sure.
Can you just for briefly, can I interrupt you and have you talk about those nanoparticles that you had mentioned to me in our previous conversation?
Oh, sure.
And why you need the different microns of screens as you come down?
Right. Well, one of the problems that a lot of people have is if you go too dry, or say you use nitrogen or something to break down the material, what'll happen is you'll end up with very, very small particles, what I call micro biomass. And when you do that, you create a lot of micro biomass because you're actually powderizing everything down to cellular level. And when you do that, you end up with a lot more material to sieve away, to get rid of. So actually being a little, I don't even know how to say this, but being a little less aggressive and using your hands or vibrators or just time and drying the material out, I find to be better. I generally, and we can talk about, I know there's one of the questions you had about the resonator. One of the things I find just to do quantity, not because it's the best, but it's quantity and size, is to use a resonator in a freezer rather than using CO2. I've used a resonator for, I don't know, since they've been made, 7, 10 years, whatever it's been now. And using CO2 is great. The trouble is the atmosphere in the room changes because you're releasing so much CO2. You can't really work in that atmosphere legally, quote unquote. and so forth. So I found that just working in about a 9-degree freezer or a freezer, walk-in freezer, whatever, and letting the material settle, it takes longer to process the keeving that way, but it's basically putting a 200 micron screen on the machine and then letting the material tumble it through that screen to collect the keef. And then we'll take that and then separate that again at 75 microns. Most dry sieving is done from 75 to 150. Your wet
Okay.
bubble bags tend to go down to 45 to 150. Everybody has their thing. I will dry sieve down to 45 to 150, and sometimes I'll do 75. It really, like anything, it depends on the material. And of course, every plant's different. We all know that, which means the trichomes are a little different. Again, things like very greasy or oily material is always problematic for anybody, bubble hashing or dry sieving. So your temperature can be the issue, and going colder can help. But there are some materials, some plants that are just greasy.
And so one of the things we've talked about on the show is bottlenecking genetics and the way our market will shift genetic breeding in one way or another. Would you say that the dry sieving tech would kind of lead that genetics in a certain direction as from a breeding standpoint?
We've kind of cornered a couple of different phenomes now that actually release their trichomes much quicker, much quicker and easier than other plants, and at almost normal temperatures. So those are things we're trying to breed in. And like anything else, realistically, finding the plant that releases best and gives you the most and doesn't mold and doesn't have problems is always difficult. That's why we're actually pheno hunting through this year again. We're going to start in March again in Spannabis and then Morocco. We're going to do another trial run there, probably another 10 or 20,000 seeds of different types of different ones, and try those in the different areas. And then once again, get our feedback and then start breeding those for them. Because we're looking at millions of seeds there, and we're trying to get them up to, they have different problems in different areas there. So it's like any place else you're growing, it's the terroir and all that is relative.
Yeah, and so also the farming practices of the people before you know what I mean? I think we kind of saw how that, our buddies landed on a situation that they now have to mitigate and get ready for a good growing season for the next year. So as we're talking about dry sieving and so kind of sifting these heads, we're looking for that 90th percentile of just pure gland heads. When you go dry versus, say, a fresh frozen wash, chemistry-wise, what are the kind of the differences there?
Well, there's a few things that make this more productive, I would say. And I think it's almost a turnaround on the fresh frozen deal. I've never really preferred that myself. I can explain why to somebody later or whatever. But when you freeze the plant immediately like that, one of the things that helps the trichomes release from the stalk itself is a little enzyme that comes up the plant when it's killed or when that trichome becomes old and aged and colored. It releases them and lets a new one go in its place, right? So that enzyme is released in those, few days, I guess you'd say, a few hours. I don't know exactly. I don't know that anybody knows exactly, but basically I'll take and cut a plant down and hang it for 2 days, then freeze it. Because I want that enzyme to get there to release those trichomes. Plus I'll take, and I usually, and this will sound crazy to everybody making ash, but I use the sift, I use the shake. We've got our plants here, we take our indoor, it gets hung, gets dried, it gets trimmed, just like everybody else. And then it's put on the shelf for sale. I take all the rest, anything that's trimmed and the very, very micro small buds, that's what I use in the dry sieving.
And so the vibration is going to help prevent you from breaking down all of that biomass that you're trying to avoid.
Right. What I'll do is I'll keep it first in a resonator, and I'll freeze the material. I'll take it once I've got it done. I take it, put it in the freezer for a day or two, let it get to temp, and then I'll resonate it to get the keef off. Then I'll take that keef and I bring it in here where I've got low humidity, and I'll wait a day or two, and then I'll run that on a 75 micron. Right. I've got my freeze dryers here, so if need be, depending on the moisture content it gets when I'm keeping, I can dry it down, then 75 micron it, and then I take that material and run it through the static machine. That's where I get to refinement. This machine was made to do quantity. It's not a refiner to go from 90 to 100%. Okay, what we're doing is taking 50% and making it 90 plus. But we're not in that. We can't refine yet. And I say yet because we're working on everything. Don't get me wrong. But we're in the 90 plus percentile when we get through those stages. And to be realistic, to be realistic, like I tell people, if you really want to refine it past that, then you take a hand screen and a half an hour and you'll be there. Right. Yeah. But that refining is much easier that way than it is with the equipment. You can do it with the equipment. It'll just probably be a 1 hour process of refeeding and refeeding before you actually get there. And it's probably quicker by hand is what I've found. But the machine works great. And this is where, like the people in Morocco, we did 23 machines just last month in Morocco. And we're set to probably do that many or more this month, because those are dry sift people. And once they saw the machine, they've got 10 guys, 20 guys in a room beating on drums, more or less. It's plastic surrounding the weed with a filter below it. So they're pounding through the trichomes, right, all day long. They take that, and then they would take that and put it on hand screens like the big one here. And then they would refine that. So their base separation with beading, that was quote unquote their low grade. That's their standard real dry brick hash you'd see, not moist at all, pretty dry and brittly. And then you'll get the higher grade, which they would refine by hand to get there. They're using this machine now. So what used to take them half a day to get by hand, they're getting in an hour on this machine. So for them, it's been a godsend.
Well, before we move on to the machine, which we're about to get to, and I'm super excited about that, can you talk a little bit about the resonator? And because in the past, keef was always an unattractive form of processing because of all the contaminant. So can you kind of talk a little bit about that resonator and how you're able to screen out a little bit?
Tumbler. Any tumbler would be similar, more or less. But basically what you're doing is it's got a screen around it. We have different versions we use in Europe because of the standards there, using stainless steel and so forth. So they're all stainless, everything there. But of course, the machine is $65,000, $75,000 too. So, there's always the relative. The one thing we're able to do here in America right now is we're able to use some plastics in our processing, and we're not getting dinged for it yet, quote unquote. But good manufacturing practices in Europe, and I forget the other standard, it's another acronym. We have a machine that meets those in Europe. We sell those in Europe, no problem. I could sell those in the United States. The difference is $30,000 for a base unit, right? Bump it up with the pieces I got here, say it's $45,000. The other model is $65,000. So it's $20,000 more relative. And but it has all the bells and whistles, and like I say, it passes all the qualifications for Europe. So we're allowed to use a resonator. Is basically a drum with a screen on it, right? And the screens come in different micron. He's got 150, 200, 75, 45, whatever, quite a few. But basically, we use the higher end, the 200 micron or the 150 micron, and we'll key that material. Now, you're absolutely correct. What happens in keying like that is you retrieve a lot more stalks than trichome heads, okay? And you also retrieve a lot of trichomes that are attached to the stalk. And that's where this machine comes in, and this is where the sieving comes in. Is actually the difficult part for anybody, bubble hashing or dry sieving, is getting those trichome heads to separate off that stalk. to get them separated and then be able to sort them out. That's half the trick. So using screens has always been a problem where you would, if you wanted to hand screen stuff, you'd sit down for a day and do it. And at the end of the day, you had enough to get you, your girlfriend, your friend, and his girlfriend high, and you were out of it by the end of the night and had to do it again tomorrow. This machine allows you to do more than you could smoke in one night in half a day, right?
For sure.
You got another half a day to make money. So my point being, it's just so much faster and cleaner. Now, I sent you a link to get to the Sambo site, but if you go to the Sambo Creek YouTube, you can see videos of the machine working where you can actually see the trichomes falling, and then they're attracted to the electrical plates, one negative, one positive, and they actually go sideways. As someone who's been in this business for a long time and somebody who's dry sifted for a long time and only did it for personal because there's no way this is going to be commercially viable. It's just too labor intensive, right? But to now have this, it's really dramatic. When you first see it, if you've ever dry sifted, it was all I could do I just stared at it with my mouth open, just going, oh my God, it works. It's working. I could, we're seeing it. It was amazing.
How much?
And I'd like to say Charles is the one to pat on the back for that stuff. He owns the company, and I worked with him for years on this, but he's the one who ramrodded this whole thing to actually get us over the top.
How much power do you have to run something like this? It sounds like it's like a powerful machine.
Milliamps. We're running on milliamps. Actually, there's an air compressor, which you can't see. It's on the other side of the building, or the wall here. But the air compressor is the thing that draws the most power. That's it. This machine, I think totaled out, we might be at 5 to 10 amps. I mean, maybe. Okay. These two boxes up here I've got lit up. I don't know if you can see them.
Yeah.
But they run on milliamps. So it's high voltage, but it's milliamps. So in other words, if I touch the panel, which I've had happen, it's a good shock, but it's not going to kill you. It's not going to stop your heart. It's not going to do anything like that. It's milliamps. But you do feel it because there's a lot of voltage, a shitload of voltage. I hate to say that, but it is. But yeah, the power-wise itself, the machine, vibrator, power units, and the rest that's on the equipment here, like I say, might be 5 amps.
That's cool.
The air compressor on the other side of the wall, that's where the power is. And I've got a fairly large one. I believe it's about a $400 or $500 model on a Harbor Freight, right? Nothing super fancy. I like a big tank, a large tank. The reason for that is the water separation, because once again, dry sieving. So not only does the atmosphere here and the material need to be dry, but that air coming in from the air compressor has to be dry. So I have a air drying system on the side to dry the air that comes in. It goes through these micro beads, and they collect the water. So they turn from blue to pink as they gather the water. So there's no water in the line. We actually have an adapted system, which I don't have. It's a $10,000 upgrade. But what it does is monitor the air coming in, the air in the machine, and the material itself. So that's a modification you can add in. I say it's a $10,000 one. I've been doing this a long time with this machine, so right now I don't have one, but eventually I will.
Yeah. So let's dive into the machine, because I've seen a little bit of stuff online about it. It sounds pretty cool, but I honestly don't know much about it. So
Sure.
give us the name, and then let's dive into what the cool shit that it does, basically.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll move my camera over here a little more, and then get where I can point at things with the machine, because it's a little more complicated than just, go in there and it comes out the other end. You know what I mean? So give me just a second.
Awesome. And JR, while he's setting this up, how did you hear about this?
Well,
Actually met Charles years ago, because I've been working in bubble hash and making hash for a lot of years, Frenchie and all kinds of people. So it was one of those things where I met him and his system makes sense. He did a lot of things that no one else did to make it better, and actually did some studies on things that nobody else even looked at, like how does the water flow when you're in the quote unquote washer itself, right? What's actually going on in the water? And what about the blades, pushing up or pushing down, or where are the trichomes going, or how should they come out, and all those things. So if you look at the Sambo Creek equipment, you'll notice there's many things on there. If you get into the videos, you can see that make it so much better than others. There's actually things you can look at and see. This is why this one works better. This is why that works better. Oh yeah, there it is in video. We actually made a plexiglass one. He did, and used balls in it to show you the action. Things like that. That other
manufacturers,
they just show you a machine and tell you a price. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, it worked great. I swear.
I thought it was cool though that the Sambo Creek website doesn't just have $30,000 machines. You can get bucket vibrators, you could get bags, you could get the dry sift screen. So there's a lot there.
Oh yeah. We carry a full line of things. We're trying only put out what we know works, and we've tried and tested. It's not something we're doing flash of the pan. Anyway, let me kind of show you this. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah, that looks great.
I'm going to show you. Down here is where we start. I'll open the doors here and show you what's inside. Basically, this funnel area down in here is where we put the material. We start at, oh man, damn, told you they shock you. I got it on right now.
He got a little charge.
I didn't die. So anyway, we put the material in here, and then I hope you guys can see that okay now. This is the vibrator here. You can see I got some material left from our testing. This vibrator then vibrates the material out this and down in the funnel, okay? Goes in the funnel here, and we have an air system here that pushes it through. So this creates a suction, so it sucks the material down the tube. Now this tube that's here looks like standard hose, but that's a patented hose. And what that hose does is actually add some static electricity as well as dislodge the trichome heads from the stalks. That's part of why it's there. And that's why
just to stop you right there, a big part of how this all has to work is that charging of the head in a positive and then letting the other biomass and particulate be negative, right?
Yeah, the trichomes naturally have a positive charge. See, we're not charging them here at all.
Oh, okay.
There's no charge being added here at all. Okay, this is all just put the material in and it's moving through. Now it's getting a charge in here in the hose, but it's a light charge. And what that does is the trichomes themselves will pick up a positive, but the biomass is always carrying a negative because of the water in it. Okay, so there's always a negative transition there. We actually have a new meter which you can buy that reads voltage and polarity. So you can actually aim it at the plate or aim it at the hose or aim it at the material, aim it at any part on the machine and check to make sure the machine is putting out what it should, the proper polarity and all those things. We just got that. It's actually on the website. I think it might be up. If not, we posted a couple of pictures of $500 little tool, but well worth it. But
so anyway, then it goes up the tube.
Go through the hose here and come up. I apologize for moving around so much. But basically, then it comes out up top here at the nozzle. Okay, we've got a vibrator in that nozzle. So it shakes it slightly because, unfortunately, 3D printing isn't as smooth inside as it is outside. And we needed to shake it a little bit just to keep the loose material going. Then it'll fall between these two plates here. And when it falls between the two plates, the negative side will attract biomass. The positive side will attract trichomes. And then the ones that didn't get enough charge or weren't attracted will keep falling and fall straight through. They'll get the discharge here. We have 2 discharge wands here that keep it from clumping and eliminate some of our clumping issues that we had with humidity because of the process itself, and then comes right back through and then goes again. So the material can keep recirculating. And as you watch the machine run, you'll actually notice the material coming out of here will start at a nice white or a nice light yellow. And as you get to more of the trichome sticking, this will turn greener and you'll have more green mass coming out of here. What won't collect on the biomass plate will then come through. We'll run it, then clean it off, collect it, move on.
And so one of the giant advantages of this is that you're not washing away a lot of those monovolatile type terpenes. All of that's going to be kind of preserved in this process, right?
Well, exactly. I like this room. I run this room at 50 degrees. And I think most people agree, any volatiles are going to go no matter what temperature. But the average or the stable terpenes in that product, below 60 degrees, most everything is going to stay. Now, there's always some release, of course, but that, everything, I think everybody believes the same thing. I mean, we've pretty much done this for years where your dry room is 60, you know what I mean? You maintain things at 50 something and 52% humidity, whatever. Those are always proper numbers for storage. We found they just did some testing we did over a couple of years, and we found that I know it was one of your questions, was the best way to store dry material or best way to store material, period. And the one thing we found over the years is the best way to store material is in its dry, raw form. The silica shell on the trichome protects that trichome like it did on the plant growing, and protects it from UV, protects it from weather, everything. So storing things raw until you want to process it into something you want to make and use is probably a better way, is what we found. Less degradation, better flavor, better terpene retention, all those things. So rather than immediately pressing it into concentrate and shoving it in the refrigerator, we found storing it in glass containers in a cooler, dry and raw. And then when we need it as a concentrate or want to use it as an edible or whatever, then take it out and process it as necessary.
So cold cure first, then process. So once you get through this processing, in your mind, what are some of the SKUs that people or avenues that people can go with what they have on the positive and the negative side?
Well, this is where the positive, of course, is you're going to be, like I say, 90+% clean. So that's basically, you can take that and use it as raw. You can take it and press it into a concentrate. You can do whatever you can do with bubble hash, you can do with this. Put it that way. There's nothing that this can't do that bubble hash can do. But you're going to end up with more because some of the big advantages are when I'm keeving in the resonator. Okay, I've keeved that, but now I've got a biomass leftover, right? So now I take that leftover and I put it over here in a bag and put it back in the freezer. And I'm going to do sieving again at 75 or 45 micron, whatever, and get rid of that stuff. So I'm going to have a collection of leftover from there also. So I can take that and put that in that same bag that I originally had the key from. And then there's going to be some leftover here from the plate and leftover here. I can put all that in the same bag that it was the keeving bag. So all that is a waste product. All that waste product can go to BHO or alcohol and be made into something. So there's a 100% retrieval from the plant. There's no wastage. People doing bubble hash, and they can talk to me all day and I'll show you photographs and proof that you are washing away things in your water, period. Not every trichome can come off perfectly. There will be leakage, there will be holes, there will be damage. And I think I sent you the picture of that crucible where it's trichomes on the bottom, a cannabinoid, liquid cannabinoid layer, whatever you want to call it, and then there's water on top.
Yeah. So, I mean, anyone who's washed enough and dumped that water and smelt what they're dumping out in the, exactly. It's undeniable. I don't know.
It's there.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, I wanted to make sure you you guys got the machine here before we moved on completely. Is there anything you'd like to see completely? We've got a new panel here that we've added, and this control panel operates all the air movement. So our air movement up with our nozzle, our vibration in the funnel itself, and all that is controlled here. And then our control for suction is controlled here also. So all the air controls are in one location. And then I keep one power unit here for the vibrator. So all my controls are on either side when you're operating. Very easy, very good access.
And so for some of the people who are at home and they're wanting to kind of achieve these cold rooms, do you have any kind of like strategies or suggestions for them?
Always go for more than you plan. I don't know how to say this, but it really depends on the environment, the location, all those fun things. Like right now, I got tornadoes and rain going on outside almost like every day, right? So, of course, the humidity out there, I mean, I walk outside, it's probably 69, 70 degrees, but it's 100% humidity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So even keeping our building here for the plants to grow, we're having to lower that down. And then in here, I've got my own dehu, my own air, and then I have another small dehu, which I keep in the tent itself. And people go, well, why are you in a tent? Well,
yes,
part of it being dry sieving. Dry sieving is like playing with talcum powder. Get out your talcum powder and start playing with it. Somebody walks by your table, that stuff will lift off and follow them, right? You breathe on it heavily, and now you created a cloud. And it's the same with this stuff. Dry sieving, you're basically dealing with talcum powder. So the less air movement, the less things bothering this operation in here, the better. The more I can control the air movement in this tent. I can make sure it's not the air conditioning from the AC unit isn't blowing on me and sweeping stuff off the table or blowing it out of the machine and whatever. I don't mean to be dancing around. Let me set this thing down again for you. I'm sorry. But yeah, just to keep things on a steady plane, because, that's probably better. Oh, sorry. You'll have to cut that part out.
Nah,
It's all
it's
good.
all good.
But anyway, so yeah, it's just a matter of I forget where I was. Dry
So
sieving, you don't have to have super cold. Like I know I've seen many bubble hatchers, and I've done it myself. You're working in a walk-in freezer, right? And I understand that to a point, but I think that's been taken over the edge a bit because, like I say, I think everybody knows that if you keep the temperatures between 40 to 50 and 60, you're maintaining that product fairly well. Much colder, yes, the colder, better, longer retention. There's always degradation. If it's exposed to oxygen, it will be just getting,
oxidized. Yeah.
Exactly. So, if you can store with nitrogen or something like that, that will help you too. But I now store everything raw. I keep all of our stuff. We'll sieve it out. We'll heave it out. We'll sieve it out, and then we'll dry it. Make sure it's dry enough. Container it up, and then save that up to make our runs with the machine. Then run the machine. A couple of things that we're looking at that I'm working on a self-cleaning system now. It's coming along, but I can't say we're there yet. But we have some other products we'll be coming out with. We've got a larger version of this machine, which we do. We've done a few of them. We got another new one coming out for somebody in New York right now, which will be another large operation, like 25 kilos an hour kind of stuff, large numbers.
Well, the first time that this dry sieving and dry sift kind of came onto my radar was back in the day when the Cuban grower won that High Times Cup with his dry sift in a hash category. And that's when they started talking about, the 99% pure and the, 6-star and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so we've been in this rosin craze now for a good 5, 6, 7 years and its evolution. Do you see dry sift in this way kind of picking up and creating its own momentum as a revolution in hash making?
Well, without a doubt, because like I say, in the long run, the expense to get in is less. So the equipment's going to cost you less to start. Your room and the equipment you have to have for your room is less. I don't have to have drains in my floor. I don't have to have an RO system for the water. I don't have to have a lot of space so I can wash and drain and do all that. I don't have to have freeze dryers, but I had them here, so I'm using them. You know what I mean? But there's many of those things that you would use in bubble hash that you don't need for this process at all. So there's a couple things. Yes, you've got to keep your material. I use a vibrating sifter. I think it costs it was under $200, right? Now the one I've got in Europe, which is all stainless and refined and all that, it's $65,000, right? And it's the bee's knees, right? But you got to have that kind of wallet, and that's why I've tried to assemble things for the United States for the people I know, the single source growers, the guy that's got a couple hundred plants, maybe even a couple thousand, but that's it. You know what I mean? He's not doing fields, 40 acres, right? He's just doing what he has. But most people are that, or they're processing their friend's couple hundred pounds, or that guy's couple hundred pounds, but they're not processing over a long period of time. Now, I do have a few clients that do large numbers and handle many clients like that, but they're rare birds. You know, there's not many people. I've got one co-packer. Every machine I've ever seen at every show, she owns, all in one facility. I've never seen everything in one facility. You know what I mean? All the different packaging equipment, all the different trimming equipment, all the different processing equipment, and all the biggest and best, right? But that's one. She's the only one in the whole Northern California like it. She's one of, she's it. But yeah, with dry sieving, you're saving an expensive building. You're saving in permits, right? I don't have to have any super permit for dry sieving. I don't even, there's no volatiles, there's no nothing, right? So I'm okay there. And my process is faster than bubble hashing if I take trim, which I do. So that means all the bud we grow, we can sell on the shelf for the most money. And I'm taking the product that's getting the least amount of money and turning it into a sellable product.
Yeah, I think that's huge because remember, I know back in the day we would
bubble hashers. See, that's the thing with trim. I'm pulling better numbers than the bubble hashers are with bud.
Yeah. Well, you got all that surface area to work with as well. And like back in the day, we would take bags of our trim and just fucking take it out and, get rid of it. And so to be able to have a process.
I made a lot of money in those days. I made a lot of money.
Yeah. I'll shout out to that too.
Well, nobody knew about keeving then.
Or even making BHO when BHO first came online. I had access to shit tons of trim because they were just going to throw it all away.
Exactly.
And so I think that process of taking your byproduct in a flower market, if that's what you're in, and using that to create another revenue stream, because God knows us as cannabis growers and owners of businesses, we have to have multiple revenue streams. Otherwise,
you can't be throwing stuff away.
No.
And that's where, like I say, in this system, everything that's quote unquote not your prime product, not your A1, right? Everything else can be collected and then used. You can get alcohol and make pens, or you can BHO it, however, whatever your thing is. I prefer personally with the alcohol, and like I tell people, that way we're getting 100% retrieval from that plant, right? So we've got all the prime stuff out that we can use for making concentrate, press it into rosin, whatever, right? So we got the stuff that everybody wants. And in the same vein, like our pre-rolls, I'm going to be putting raw trichomes into our pre-rolls because they burn so much better more even and more constant, and the flavor lasts all the way through.
Oh, yeah. Right? I'm into that.
I've tried. I can make hash wraps. I got the gear. I've done them. But I found with the hash wraps, you've got to be just perfect. Like you were asking about the plates, right? A lot of times the stuff right off the B plate, you can make a hash wrap with, but
So
not
people may
every.
not people may not know what that is. Can you kind of go ahead
Okay,
and explain what a hash
explain
wrap
it.
is?
Basically, you collect that and then press it, right? Use a little heat, a little hot water in a wine bottle, kind of a deal, right? And press
Crunchy.
it out and make a sheet of pressed hash, quote unquote, a thin layer, and then roll that around. I use a 3D printed item and roll it around the cone there. And then you would fill that with weed. And it's basically making the hash wrap the paper. So there's
Yeah,
no
and
paper.
so
It's just filled with weed and it's hash on the outside. The trouble with those is, and I like them, don't get me wrong, but it's one of those things where you've got to get it perfect. Otherwise, it turns into grease and runs down the sides. You've got to hold it special and smoke it special so it doesn't fall apart on you, or bend over and lay down. And, you know, and then when you do the hash hole where you're laying in a worm in the middle, a lot of times when you make a free roll like that, it burns down to there and then it'll glob up again and start running on the side on you and doing all kinds of fun stuff. Where I put the raw trichomes in and mix it in evenly through the joint, right? It burns killer.
Yeah,
And it smokes great, smokes clean. And this way I've got a primary product. I can, you know, have an edible product if I want. I can do whatever with it. I do nano, some of the solventless for edibles, because I believe that's the only way to do edibles personally anymore, where the nano hits you right away. It's like within 30 minutes, you got the effect within 30 minutes. And most people, it's really quick.
Yeah.
But that's the advantage there, because you can eat that when you want to go to sleep, say, and you're taking that gummy at night to go to bed, and you got to wait 2 hours. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, nano, boom, bang, you're in bed.
For sure. Yeah, we did a show about edibles about a month or so ago, and we were talking
Great.
about emulsification, like the nano emulsification. This has been really interesting. We went to JR and I went to Emerald Cup. You know, what was that, beginning of August, and we interviewed Heritage Hash Co. And so they do bubble hash
I
and
know her.
washing and stuff like that. Bell, yeah. So I
knew Frenchie before he died. I worked with Frenchie quite a bit.
yeah. So I just, you know, that's what I've seen out here, and I'm excited to see folks like them and others like hopefully someday get access to this technology, because just if you see what folks are already doing with, you know, like you guys were saying, bubble hash, and they're washing, there's so much that gets washed out. I can't wait to see what people are able to do with this technology.
Well,
Yeah.
even like keeping those traditions of like the temple ball. Can you kind of talk about how this could apply towards maybe a temple ball?
Well, like I say, if you can make it out of bubble hash, you can make it with this. And trichomes are trichomes. All we're doing is collecting tomatoes, people. And we either collect them with water or we collect them with air, one way or the other. Just no two ways around it. And basically, I prefer the solventless, true solventless methods of dry hash. Because people can talk about solventless and say, oh, well, water is just a transporter. It's not a solvent. Well, water dilutes things. It's a solvent. I'm sorry.
It's the ultimate solvent, right?
It's a transporter. Okay, fine. But my point being, you're throwing away things in that water that you shouldn't. You know it, I know it. So if I'm dry sieving, that's truly solventless, because there is no water, there is no chemistry, there is nothing but air and temperature and humidity. That's all we're dealing with. So it makes it a lot easier. And like I say, I totally understand 99% of the people in the world don't like dry sieving for the simple fact it's so labor intensive. It took days to get anything, you know, blah, 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 blah. Oh my God, I spent hundreds of dollars on these screens, and I spent a half a day over there and I've got 2 grams.
Right.
Yeah, it's that's always been the headache, where this actually converts it right around. And like I say, I think a lot of people, I've been talking to quite a few. We've got the Maryland Business Summit coming up, and then the thing is, a lot of these people are still stuck on the bubble hash, water and water and water. And like I tell them, I said, hey, look, I'll get you into the dry sieving for half the cost of that wet room, right? So half the money you're going to spend on all that equipment for bubble hash, you're going to spend on this, and you're going to end up with more product in the end, and all the waste product is usable. Everything. You're going to get 100% retrieval. Well, you can't do that with bubble hash, period. There's no way to get 100% retrieval.
And you were saying you don't necessarily need freeze drying machines, right? Like,
no, if you keep at a low temperature, like in a freezer,
yeah,
and then I bring that, like I keep my room at 30% or below, and that's the key. I found 30% air humidity is where kind of my borderline is, I guess you'd say. I try and always keep the rooms below 30%. If I below 30%, I found very few materials that don't work. You know what I mean?
Well,
like
I think
90% of the stuff works or more.
I think that's the point, is a lot of people might be over fixating on the temperature of the room without compensating and understanding they need that dehumidification to be in that stable environment where you can go ahead and do your processing in a relatively safe manner.
Well, especially, like I said, with dry sieving, the material has to stay like sand. You want it to flow like dry sand. You know, like you put some sand in a plate, you know, that's dry, and move it back and forth. That's how it should work. And that's exactly what we want. You know what I mean? And that's where in bubble hash, you don't have to worry about those things. I mean, I've seen bubble hash people do it at higher temperatures and get away with it. But, you know, the reason you're doing it there is the water temp is usually not correct. You know what I mean? Most people don't do all of the steps necessary to keep everything at the right temperature. And then I laugh because people go, oh, well, if you're dry sieving, you're losing terpenes. I go, well, how's that? Oh, well, it's exposed to the air the whole time. It's sitting out like that. It's losing terpenes. I'm like, no, my room is 50 degrees or 52 or 54 maybe. So I'm not losing terpenes there. And my whole process, that's the temperature the material is going to reach, right? And when you take your material from bubble hashing, you go over to the press and press it, what temperature are you pressing at, right? You can smell the terpenes coming off the presses. So
yeah,
I'm losing terpenes. I say, well, wait a minute. I could put my material from this machine into a cold centrifuge and centrifuge it, and I can have concentrate that never gets over 50 degrees, ever. So yeah, it's got more terpenes, it's got more taste, it's got more smell, right? And that, I think, is where people will migrate to in the future, is going to this dry sieving and then going to a cold centrifuge processing. So there's no temperature increase on that material ever in its life getting to the customer. That's so now you can have a concentrate that never went over 50 degrees or 60 degrees at the most, right? Ever in its whole life. So yes, it's going to have more terpenes.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to know. And I think that, I think that whole processing of getting your parameters correct will make sure that you're having the kind of success with the product that you're looking for. And so moving forward, when you're selling these things, are you on site to make sure they're creating these environments so it's less headache and hassle for you in the long run?
Oh, for me, when I deal with a client, are you saying? I'm sorry, deal with clients.
So when you have a client, you want them to be set up for as successful as possible.
Yeah, for my clients in the States and the US, I'll basically go out with them once their machine lands. I go out to their location and help them put it together, help make sure their room is right, the process is going to flow. They've got a system to bring it in, process it through, sieve it through, then get it to the machine, and everything's working. Now, of course, like any place, 80, 90% of the time, they've got a few things wrong or need adjusting or, changing here and there, but that's typical. That goes with any place. But generally, it's like, set it up like you would for bubble hash. In other words, with temperature, try and maintain a 50-degree temperature. 50 something is fine. And the big thing is the humidity. Put in a good dehu unit and circulate that air and get yourself below 30. Now you're going to find all these dehus, are set at higher temperatures. Most of them, they try and do it at 62 degrees. In fact, 90% of the split units, if you put them on the dehu setting,
Yeah.
watch what happens. They go straight to 62 degrees, almost automatic, right? So to dehu below those temps, you need to get like a lot of the bigger portable dehus will go down into the 30s. But most of the mounted the different, I forget the different names. I don't want to sponsor anybody, but the ones that hang in the ceiling, you see most of the ones in the grow rooms and that, they'll only go down to about 50. So you've got to tweak those to get them down below that. So that's one of the things that does make it a little more complicated when you think about it. Your bubble hash, if you were to do bubble hash, you're going to have to buy all the same stuff. You won't have a DU, but you're going to have a hell of a freezer, right? And then the water lines and drain lines and all that. That's the part that I think a lot of people don't understand is when you add water to a process, you've got to now have drains for all the water you're collecting, right? To pass all the permits and so forth. And when you get into doing, when we get to the FDA, when it starts really jumping in this market, you're going to find to go to an FDA, quote unquote kitchen, which is what they're going to recommend or require for edibles. I'll bet, I hate to say this, but I'll bet 80% of the market can't make that. I'm not trying to be dishonest. I don't know. It's like I don't know all the edible people out there. You know what I mean? But from what I see, it seems like maybe 20 or 30% of them have got a real processing lab, a real processing kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sterile environment, the hood, the hats, the whole bit.
Well, it's a, I feel bad for those edible makers because I know for like in the state of Oregon, they had to test the material before they made anything. Then they had to test the material that they made. Then they put it into the fucking candy or whatever. Then they had to test that. And it was just like, it was so cumbersome and so hard for them.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to test anything until the end. The consumer's not going to get it until the end anyway, right?
Right.
So all the other processes, you could do a sampling test real quick and get your idea of, okay, yeah, this is clean. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's in the percentage range. Go, go, go. You know what I mean? And then do all your complicated. That's the thing, they've actually gotten this system so complicated with the metric and the whole bit, and they've made a mess of it. I mean, just an absolute mess of it. That's
one of the things we kind of hit on here is they're creating all these rules and laws that they economically can't enforce. And so moving forward, I hope that people are able to navigate this and still stay to the true nature of the plant. And like I said, Tim, I really would like to have you come back on and maybe walk through some more of this process and get some more of your story. It's been incredible. So before we wrap up the show, can you kind of give some people some shout outs, maybe some events you're going to be at and where people can find Sambo Creek?
Sure. I work at Bricks here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So this is where I've got my lab built now. And we're going to be running out of here. I'll be at the Marijuana Business Conference. We have a booth there. Sambo Creek has a booth there. And we're doing a couple of different shows and tells. We've got some brand new equipment coming out there I can't say anything about, but we do have some very new, very innovative products coming out. And we'll have all the equipment there. We'll be doing some demos and so forth. I'll be in Spanibus. We'll have a booth in Spanibus. Then we'll be going to Morocco after that. I've got an operation going in Nepal right now with Joe. We're doing a medical there. We're trying to get Nepal legal again, and we've got the medical going there. So we're working on it, man. We're going to have hash out of Nepal again someday.
That's
awesome.
Fantastic. That's great.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Tim. We really appreciate it. It's been great to talk to you. Really super interesting to hear about this stuff. And like I was saying, you're just making me think of my favorite strains and getting to taste them after they've gone through this whole process. And when you were saying, never going above 50 its entire life through the entire life cycle of the product, That's a really cool idea. So thank you, Tim, for your time. We'll be hopefully having you on again in the future.
No problem.
And then I'm going to put this out on the 4th, I think, which is tomorrow. So I will just say shout out in the episode to everyone to vote. Make sure to vote on Tuesday. Make your voice heard.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, no worries. And
Yeah.
I think I sent you guys off a link to the Sambo Creek information stuff.
Cool.
I think I sent it over to JR there.
Yeah,
So
we'll add
that's
that.
something you could post in my line there, or my Dirt to Terp is my Instagram.
Awesome.
That'd be fine.
Great.
Excellent.
Well, JR, as always, growers
Growers
love
love.
everyone. Peace.
All right. You guys have a great